I'm jacked really to have our next guest on the show. It's Andy Johnson from the Fried Egg. And Andy, I've been a fan from a long way away for a long, long time. So it's great to have you. Welcome to my show.
Mark, pleasure's all mine. Excited to chat courses and strategy and maybe a little bit PGA Tour, but real honor to be on the show.
The honor is all mine. Okay, for the folks around the world, because we are global, um, tell them a little bit about you, because I don't think everyone who is not in the United States might not be aware of the Fried Egg, although all of our US fans, I mean, they're all patrons and fans, I would think. But tell us about you.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm a golf fan who started a golf media company about 8 years ago, and it started as a newsletter and then became a newsletter website and podcast, and now we kind of operate the same way. We have two podcasts, the Fried Egg and the Shotgun Start, and then we have a newsletter that goes out 3 times a week that covers kind of everything going on in golf that's free. And then we have a website where we post a lot of articles to thefriedegg.com. So it's a I started when I started it, I wanted a easy way for busy professionals to stay in touch with the game, because that's what I found myself as someone working outside of golf. It was just kind of sometimes hard to stay engaged with the game, and I kind of started something that I thought would make following golf a lot more fun for people with jobs. So that's the premise of it, and really what we cover is what are the people that myself and the people that work with me enjoy in golf. So it's kind of a pursuit of different niches, and one of those is golf course architecture and courses.
Okay, you're a parent, and I'm appreciative of you to wake up early for us. You're a parent of two podcasts. I know you shouldn't have favorites. Do you? And if so, which one?
I think it just depends on what you're interested in, right? I think the Shotgun Starts kind of a more it's a look at the PGA Tour and everything going on in the current events of golf, and then the Fried Egg podcast is more of like kind of your deep dive exploration podcast
Yeah.
that covers a wide range of topics. We've done 40 plus episodes of interviews with Tom Doak, arguably the greatest living architect, to, my co-host on that podcast, Garrett Morrison, has done a few like documentary series podcasts on like the evolution of the golf ball and
Mhm.
stuff like that. So it just depends what you're looking for. If you're looking to kind of dig deeper into the game and different areas of the game, the Fried Egg is a really interesting show. And then if you just love all the drama that's going on in professional golf, and you want just a lot of sometimes unserious banter and then some serious banter about what's going on, then the Shotgun Starts for you.
I would say our on the mark tribe is kind of more the former. They're yet to improve themselves, but a little levity, folks, is not a bad deal, especially in the days in which we currently find ourselves here in 2023. You talked about how this came about, the inspiration for it. I mean, you described the easy way for busy people to stay in touch with the game. I mean, a podcast is, a lot of folks try it, few folks make a success of it, fewer make money out of it, and it's a labor of love. So, what was the inspiration for this?
To be completely honest, with the podcast, I was a podcast fan. I mean, my last job, it was in tech media, so I was worked for a company that covered the tech world,
Mm-hmm.
and we wrote about companies and what they were doing, and I came into my boss's office and 2014 or so, and I said, "Hey, we really need to get a podcast." At the time, I was listening to Bill Simmons
All right.
nonstop, who's like, kind of like the godfather of podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
So, and she said, "Oh, what would we ever do a podcast on?" And I said, "Oh, we'd cover, entrepreneurs and talk about their journey and how they built their companies." She said, "Nobody listens to podcasts." I was at the time I lived in the city of Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a 40-minute commute on public transportation. I'd walk to the L, get on the L, go to the office, walk to the office,
Yeah.
right? And every morning that 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 trip was,
The time.
Bill Simmons, Zach Lowe, like listening to podcasts. So when it was like a very when we did the newsletter, you start small, and
Yeah.
the newsletter was what I could handle while I was working another job, right? And I could do three times a week, and the website was a natural extension. But then, you get done with like the first episode was like after the Masters. I think it was it 2015, 2016, 2016 Masters. And it's
Yeah.
like you want a form that you can just kind of talk about things. And I think that's the beauty of podcasts is it offers you more room to explore topics than an article. Like, if you wanted to take
No word
everything
count.
covered in, yeah, if you took everything that was in a podcast and put it into an article, it would be, 15, 20,000 words. It'd be just insane. So
Mhm.
the depth that you can go in a podcast, I think that's what really makes podcasts stand out, and the ones that are really successful. The key is depth, being able to go deep, because if you can't go deep, you can't cover a lot of it, keep it interesting for 40 minutes, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's where I always tell people is like you need to understand, like if you want to start a podcast, you need to understand what subject matter you want to cover, and you want to be very authentically you. Don't try and mimic anybody else, because if you're you, you can go deep on anything, right?
Sure.
If you're authentic to yourself, everybody has interests and stuff, and that's where your podcast should kind of rest, is the things that you can talk about forever.
Well, I can talk about golf instruction and golf forever. I want
Yeah.
to read you a quote by you in a recent blog. And folks who haven't checked out the Fried Egg, you want to go and do this. I just want to find the quote here real fast, because it's a great place for real golf people to go. And this is on the Fried Egg. And I'm going to read back to you your own words, Andy, unless this was Garrett. You say, I think it's you. You're like, in other words, everyone is taking this shit too seriously. There's no such a thing as an authoritative list on the world's greatest courses. They are just millions of golfers, all with unique tastes, quirks, biases, and conflicts of interest. And then you go on, and it's basically an article about one or other magazines' top 100 list of golf courses, which is kind of like your expertise, I would figure. And so I love the way that you would package that to say, look, folks, let's just get real about this. Stop tossing mud across the Twitter aisle at each other. And let's just, call the spade the spade. So with that there, I want to ask you, what's your philosophy on golf course design? I mean, you were a caddy from what I understand back in the day. You love the game. If you were to design a course, what would your philosophy be?
Yeah, so that was Garrett.
Okay.
But I share a lot of Garrett's beliefs
Mhm.
on the subject of ranking courses. I think, in terms of golf course design, it's my favorite courses are the ones that embrace kind of their location. Like if you wanted to start from the very scratch, like what makes a place special
Yeah.
is that it's a place that feels like a unique place. So you want, like, to me that's kind of generally why people really like, and we are in this trend where the natural golf courses have really taken a hold.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that you can't create a place. I think there are some really great examples of golf courses that were created,
Yeah.
but when you work with the natural land, the natural site that you start with, you immediately get something unique, because just like a golf shot, like something I think about with golf shots all the time, and what makes golf so amazing is that you never ever hit the same shot in your life twice,
Yeah.
right? There's always something different. The lie's different, the wind's different. Like you never hit the same shot two times in your life in golf. And that might be one of the reasons that it's like the most alluring, captivating, and enthralling game in the world, right? But with golf courses, if you have a golf course that embraces the unique features of the land that the golf course is on, it's very, there's no other piece of property, no other 200 acres that's exactly the same,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Unless maybe it's just a dead flat field, which if it's a dead flat field, you're going to create, and that's where like some creativity from the architecture comes in, right? So I think like right from the get-go, the architects that are doing the best work are the ones that are finding the most unique features of land and finding different ways to use the land. So like this is I think the course that most people are most familiar with is Augusta National because of the Masters, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you think about Augusta National, there are these hubs of activity, these interesting areas of the golf course that the golf course visits really frequently. So one to think of is like the first one you really encounter is the second green. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of down in the low, and then there's kind of a ridge behind it, and you have the second green, the 8 tee, the third green, the third tee,
Yep.
the seventh green, and that area is just this little hub of activity.
May
And
I
the way,
interrupt you for a second?
yeah,
Keep that thought in mind. For what it's worth, folks, and I know you probably don't care, if you put a gun to my head, I would say to you the second hole is my favorite hole on the golf course. And my favorite view is the one from up in the fairway to the right of the
yeah,
two fairway bunkers looking down over the green. It opens up in front of you almost more so than when you just walk onto the premises the first time and you look down the hills and you can see 18. You can't really see 18 green because of the humps and hollows, but 9 green and looking down into the valley. But that view from a top two fairway is it's a picture worthy moment.
it's an incredible spot, and that shot into that green is so enthralling to watch. Right, it's just
Mhm.
one of the most fun shots. I mean, if one of Masters tip as a press, like press is you're usually inside the ropes. At the Masters, you're not. So you have to kind of rely on different methods, and in a little unknown, not really well known aspect of the Masters is people put their chairs down.
Yeah.
But if people aren't sitting in the chairs, it's like the the I guess the culture is sit in the chairs if you want, and then whoever's chair it is, they'll just come up, tap you on your shoulder, and go. So like one of the best, and this is my recommendation to like almost everybody, the best places to sit during a tournament round or a practice round, go just sit right in one of those chairs behind two green
Mhm.
and watch shots come in. And I mean, it's so fun, especially if you catch it on like Sunday with that Sunday pin where they
Yeah.
can kind of boomerang it back there. I mean, it's incredible. So, anyways, Augusta is just this what makes the roars. Everybody talks about the roars, right? Oh, they're incredible. They echo through the golf course. Well, what makes the roars is
The
that there are
quality
these
of the time.
there are these concentrations of areas of interest, right? Where they have these, pockets where there's multiple greens, multiple tees that generate the roars. So that is a example of a golf course where Alistair McKenzie, when he laid it out, he found the most interesting places on that land, and he put as many greens and tee boxes and features as he possibly could around those areas.
Mhm.
So really it's working with the land. And I think that's one of the things that stands out about the old school golf courses. And everybody like why are golf courses so good from the 1920s and 30s? And there's no reason they should be so good. But one of the reasons is that they had less tools. They couldn't move all the earth they wanted,
Exactly right.
right? So when you can't move the earth, it's this idea that like constraints, if you constrain an artist, it'll yield tons of creativity.
Mhm.
So when you can't move earth, what you have to do is you have to work a little harder to find the ways to work with land. And Augusta National is a very severe site. It would not be an easy golf course to build a world-class golf course because of the severity of it. But because of the lack of tools at their hand, they found a really unique way to route and build a golf course there.
So then it begs the question, I guess, what about, because I find it fascinating. As an announcer, I get to walk these places. I haven't played very many of them, but I get to walk these places and see the best at their best play them. And then I love to just, you know, I don't troll Twitter or X, but I read, and it fascinates me that everyone has an opinion. You're entitled to it, but a lot of the folks are just watching it off television, and they really don't know what they're talking about. So I have two courses I want your take on. The first is the greatest meeting of earth and sea. as quoted, way back in the day.
Yeah.
Pebble
Pebble
Beach.
Beach.
It's freaking majestic. Talk about working with the land and the sea. What's your take there?
I mean, you talk about some of the most stunning golf holes in the world. And I think what goes a little bit under talked about, it's obviously, I mean, the ocean's right there and everybody talks about the cliffs and the ocean. I think one of the things about Pebble Beach that makes it such a great test of golf is the topography, like the small micro movements on the ground. So at Pebble, like it's not like a flat like land into the cliff. The cliffs are so big that it kind of obscures that the land's really moving, and then the architecture pairs with it well.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, a good example would be like the ninth hole,
Oh,
where that fairway is very sloped. It's flatter on the right side, but on the right side there's an ocean, so it's hard to get over to the right side. But if you have any aspirations of making a birdie, you really need to get over to that right half of the fairway to get at any pin on the left. Like the ball just, as you know, like you watch guys hit it into the left pin, it just shoots right. Like
just one bunker on that green.
yeah,
And it is not very big, and it is perfectly placed for the person who takes the
the safe.
safety off the tee down the left-hand side.
So it's like a perfect example of understanding hazards. And like I always laugh, like it's like I know they moved the fairway in on 6, right?
Yeah.
And I disagree with that. I disagree with a lot of some of the maintenance aspects of Pebble and how it's being presented now. So they moved the fairway in on 6. And their explanation was like, well, we saw that balls weren't going into the ocean. And it's like, well, imagine that. Like somebody doesn't want to hit their ball into the Pacific Ocean. Like, so everybody's hitting it left. Like the ocean's doing its job because if you hit it on the right side of 6, then you have the best angle. You have the flattest lie. You have the best angle to approach that green. The ball will kind of like corral in if
Yeah.
you're approaching that green, which like one of the cool things about that is that elevation makes the ball really chase in because that you're lowering the trajectory the ball's coming in on. So the
Yeah.
ball there runs in and everything from that right side, all the features, whether I'm not sure there's those 2 rails, those 2 little bumpers that
Yeah.
run up. I don't know if they created it or it was there, but they're amazing features because that kind of corrals a ball. It gives a huge advantage to anybody that's hitting a low chasing shot from the right half of the fairway. So it's like, this explanation of like, we brought the rough in because nobody was hitting it over there. It's like, or, well, like maybe nobody's hitting it over there because they don't want to hit it in the ocean.
I wish every time I go there, every year, I'm fortunate. I wish that now I understand why they cut the rough on that big left-hand bank down
Yeah.
for spectators. I wish they grow that stuff up because I watch the modern day player just step up there on the tee and just bludgeon the thing as hard as they possibly can in the left. If they get a break, they're fine. If not, they just kind of play it out and hit a wedge for the next one.
I mean, that's a whole, if you want to talk about holes that have like drastically changed because of distance and however, whatever your stance is on how we got to where we got with how far players hit. This is a perfect example of a hole that has dramatically changed because of, the proliferation of the vast majority of the PGA Tour hitting the ball over 300 yards, right? If you're hitting the ball 280 yards, there's no way you're going to hit it into that left rough and be able to get it up and onto the green, right?
Mhm.
Like if you hit it 320 though, that play is the smart play. It's the only way to play the hole, right? So this is an example of like if you rein distance back, that hole gets way more compelling because the best way to get to the green is to hit it at the ocean,
Mhm.
right? If you want to make an eagle, you're going to have to take on, to put a, try and maybe you just move your target 10 yards right of where, it seems like the guys just hit it at the bunker
Yep,
right
that's
now.
exactly right. Yeah.
And if they block it, it's in the fairway. If they pull it, it's in the rough and they're okay with that, right? Versus, if that distance is reined back in, hitting it left doesn't guarantee you're even going to get it over that hill,
Mm.
right? Like that's the thing, is that hill has become a foregone conclusion that you're going to get it over. That was a fascinating thing to watch with the women out there this year, is
Exactly.
that hill was like a men like some of the women were getting home in two, but if you didn't hit the fairway, it was a hard task to get over the hill. So, that is like one of the greatest holes in the world, and a lot of it is just because it's like, oh my God, I have to go from here to there.
Yeah.
But
It's
but the
it's a good 90 feet uphill. It's a long ways up there too.
but the back half of it is like, when if golf is scaled in terms, and what I mean by scaled, like the distances that players are hitting it is scaled to the 1985 version of golf. Everything on that hole is placed in the perfect spot, right? Like if you don't hit it in the fairway, that hill, you have to hit a extraordinary shot to get over the hill. And if you don't get over the hill, then it becomes an incredibly hard hole to make a five on. But if you get over the hill, if you're on the green or around the green, it's a very easy four. So like that, all of a sudden, you see how that disparity of shots and scores really increases when you have features that matter.
Yeah. Hmm. I love it. It looks like you're gently guiding us into a bowl rollback
I'm
conversation.
not I'm not trying to change anybody's mind. I'm just talking about a golf hole. That's all.
But that's the thing. Even though we're just talking about golf, I think we're helping people to an informed opinion because everyone's just shouting at each other with limited information. Because that very golf course, right? The last time the men were there for the US Open, I don't care what the winning score is. The winning score is the winning score. But I've been there when it's freaking cold and blowing off the ocean and the ball goes nowhere. And Pebble Beach is the longest golf course you ever played. And I've been there when it's warm and sunny and dry and the ball's running and then it plays short. And then everyone's like, well, it's too short. And they're just moaning on social about this. I'm like, you folks have no idea how much nature in these great locations, even Torrey Pines,
Hmm.
has so much influence on how the golf course plays. And that's just how it is, for goodness sake. Let's stop trying to cobble together what we think the winning score should be and just allow the winning score to be the lowest score of the week.
Well, that's the thing. I think has, par's been a great thing in terms of like golf viewer, right? Par was created for golf tournaments so that people understood where players
Yeah.
stood, right? It's, par provides you're able to understand. Like I was just doing some research for our year in review pods that we do on the Shotgun Start, where we like kind of go through every tournament and remember and name things. But I saw like at the PGA, Eric Cole was 5 under and Bryson was leading at 4. I think it was Bryson and Scotty were at 4
Yeah.
through round one. But Eric Cole had only played 14 holes. So he was 5 under through 14. It provides at the end of round one because there was a frost delay.
Yeah.
But so it provides this barometer of understanding where somebody is in the middle of their round, right? Like it would have looked really weird if it was like Eric Cole, 57, Bryson DeChambeau, 66. Like it doesn't, so par has it provides this awesome ability to relate players when they're in different positions through the golf course, right? But it has had a very bad impact on the way we perceive golf courses. An example is Byron Nelson, the Byron Nelson tournament at Craig Ranch. They said we need to make this golf course harder. So all they did was they just changed the par of one hole from a par five to a par four. And it's like, okay, so instead of minus 27 winning, minus 23 one. Is
That's
the
asinine, isn't it?
Well, the golf course actually got easier because one of the holes got shorter, right? If you're talking about relative scoring, like just scoring, the golf hole got easier, but the perception of the golf course got that it got harder. But in actuality, the golf course got easier. And it's like we have to like remove the association. I used to play a golf course in Chicago. It's a great golf course. I would play it on Mondays. I was friends with the superintendent. It's called Old Elm.
Yeah.
And the golf course is amazing. It's a Harry Colt course. It's amazing. It was built by Donald Ross. It's probably the most underrated great golf course in America. They just don't really care about rankings and stuff.
Mhm.
Anyways, the golf course, there's a par 73. Most of their members are like older players, like 70-year-old players. So the golf course is a par 73. But whenever I went out there, I mean, they had like these 460-yard par fives. I thought to myself, it's a par 69 for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and when you think about this, like the other aspect of it, if you play a par five as a par four, you're more aggressive and you actually play better. So there was a study done about this with the US Open, and we're on Pebble. So they studied the what hole was it at Oakmont? It's blanking me, but the second hole at Pebble and a hole at Oakmont, they saw that these two holes switched pars from par five to par four. And this is a like an academic study.
Yeah.
What they saw when they controlled the two groups is that by simply changing par, nothing else changed about the hole. No, like the yardage change was inconsequential. Nothing changed. By changing par, PGA Tour players, or the best players in the world, played the holes a quarter of a shot better. And you know why?
Mindset.
Yes.
Mindset, yeah.
They're more PGA Tour players are more incentivized by not losing a shot, as in like not making a bogey. So if it's a par four, playing aggressive to make a par, they're more incentivized of not losing than gaining a shot. So they want to not lose more than they want to win, if you think about it from that. And it's a very common thing in like people that play the stock market. It's called loss aversion.
Yeah.
It's this fear of losing. So like the thing is, like, if you are able to change your mindset, if you think like if you play a golf course, say this a 500-yard par five, that is a really easy birdie hole. If you think about that as a par four, and you're somebody that could like reach the green if you hit a good drive, like if you think about that as a par four, you will play roughly a quarter of a shot better per round. So if you think about that across like 4 par fives, if these players could just get in their head they aren't par fives, they're par fours, you could save a shot, which would be, that's the difference between being an average player and an elite player on the PGA Tour.
I hope my former college players, I was a college coach for 20 years, of listening to you right now, because I used to preach all the time. If you make 4s on 5s and 3s on 3s, you have the nucleus for a very good score. And then the other 8 holes, you just cobble together something useful and you're shooting par or better. And I'll never forget, there was one of the national championships. We went to Glade Springs outside of Charleston, West Virginia.
Yeah.
And
it's a hard course,
hole,
right?
Yeah, lots of movement, great golf course. Second hole is a members par 5, but the NCAA, in all of their wisdom, made it a par 4. So we get on the tee there in the first practice round, and you look up at the board there, the US Open style tee marker, and it's 480 yards par 4 with a blind tee shot over a hill. Fairway is like, it's like a green ribbon in front of you. It's narrow and the rough is like ankle high. And I watch my kids spraying the ball all over the joint off the tee. I'm like, easy, Tigers. I want you to change that par number to 5 and play this as if it's a par 5. If you get on the green in 2, awesome. You're putting for eagle. Otherwise, just make sure 5's the worst you're going to make. Because I can see college golfers, they're going to butcher this place, right? They're not just going to make 5s, they're going to make 6s and 7s in the interests of trying to somehow make birdie. We played that hole under par for the week just because of a mindset change like that.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's insane how your mind and like just having the right mentality about a hole. It sounds like your players, instead of walking up to it and being like, what a stupid hole, by changing your mindset to play this like a par 5, it removes this like fair or unfair aspect. That's probably one of my least things when people talk about a golf course is fair and unfair. I mean, what is fair? Fair is an objective, it's very objective. Like what one person finds fair, another person might find unfair. And really, when you boil down to golf, what golf is, there is no fairness. It's an objectively unfair sport.
It's a freaking unfair. Exactly. I know.
If anybody that subjects themselves to a lifelong pursuit of golf knows that it's cruel. It's unusual. The whole idea of golf is like, here are your sticks, here's your ball, and you got to go and conquer whatever we put in front of you. That's what golf is at the very core of it, is figuring out how to get from point A to point B in the least number of shots, no matter what's in front of you. Like a lot of the great holes and a lot of the great features at the greatest golf course in the world are objectively unfair.
Yep. Hmm. You know what I find comical? And the better golfers get at the game, the more they start to adopt this mindset. Because, I've taught beginner golfers where they get the ball in the air and it's the happiest day of their life. And I've taught elite golfers, major champions, where they miss one shot and it's like the end of the world. The golfers are actually trying to perfect this, by definition, imperfectible game. I mean,
Yeah.
you're playing on a living surface. You're playing in a moving medium in the air all of the time, and it's so mercurial that perfecting what you're doing is by definition impossible. Yet they venture down this freaking garden path, and at the end of that is just a lack of hope, despair, disillusionment. You name them; it's all at the end of that road.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, I think about this all the time as like there's no other sport where you could get as unlucky as like you hit a perfect shot and it hits the pin and it bounces into a water hazard, right? Like it's like I just hit a great shot. Was like I'm not supposed to aim at the flag got in the way and there I ended up in the water hazard. Like I mean, but that's also what makes the game so brilliant is it puts you in these leverage situations. I think that's one of the things that makes golf such a great like life sport
Mm-hmm.
is that you get used to dealing with like really bad breaks and having to get over them quickly if you want to continue to play at a high level in a round, right?
Opinion question. I got to stop you.
Yeah.
I think my longtime listeners know where I stand on this. But a divot hole, ground and repair or not, in your opinion, Andy?
Not ground or repair. We're
Heck
playing
yeah,
on an imperfect surface, like
brother.
right? Like this is the whole goes back to the spirit of golf, right? Like it is not where you hit it is where you hit it. And how the ball comes to rest is how the ball comes to rest. And you play from there.
Yeah.
You know, it is, I don't know. It just, I think that's the thing about golf is that so much you have to let go of fair and just laugh. And it's hard to do, but you have to laugh at the breaks that golf deals you because that's a lot. It's very similar to life, right? If you're able to kind of like get through your rough patches in life with a little bit of humor, I think it makes it easier to go on with golf, especially is like if you hit in a divot, like one of the things I used to play competitively as an amateur, and I just don't have the time anymore. But
Mhm.
one of the things that's really changed about my mindset, and sometimes I wonder if I'm better now than I was when I was really, spending a good chunk of my personal time at the sport. You know, one of the things that I'm so much better at now is that when my ball goes in a divot, a lot of times people will be like, "Oh, you should pull it out of that, right?" And I'm like, no, I want to hit the shot. This is going to be fun. Like the idea that like when you get into a weird spot that is fun because you're not hitting a stock shot. And something that always flashes into my brain, Jeff Ogilvy, who used to be a regular on our podcast, when I asked him about the 18th hole at Wingfoot, his ball famously ends up in a divot on
Shot
the
I've ever
final
seen.
hole.
Best pitch shot I've ever seen. That third shot that he had over there. So good.
So so I asked him about the divot, and
Mhm.
he's like, honestly, I flushed that shot. I hit a great shot from the approach shot.
Mhm.
And obviously caught the false front on 18. He goes, the thing I forgot that I always try and remember when you're in a divot is the ball flies like 3 to 4 yards shorter than if it's not in a divot.
Mhm.
And he's like, I forgot to put that into my calculation. And so it hits on like the top of the front. I mean, if it flies 2 more yards, he
Putting
might make him a birdie, right? Might be one of the most incredible approach shots we've ever seen. So it catches the front, comes back. But like I always think about that then too, is like I like laugh, I see the divot, I'm excited to hit like a different shot. And then I always pops in my mind is like this ball's gonna fly like 5 yards short.
Mhm.
So, if that's in your calculation.
You know what? It's part of the reason why I referenced that pitch shot, because to come back after that horrid break in the fairway and hit that
Yeah.
pitch, make four and win, it speaks to just the moxie of the man to try and recover, get your mind figured out to hit this very difficult third. But I love where you're going, and it reminds me of my hero, statesman, great golfer, Hall of Famer, Bob Jones. He said the keys to golf were to turn three strokes into two, basically around the greens. And he goes, and you got to learn to play the ball as it lies. It's if you want to become a skilled great golfer, play it from everywhere all of the time, because you will, as a result, from a golf teaching point of view, if you learn to hit those shots properly, by definition, you begin to actually improve your technique to be able to extricate yourself from those types of environments.
Yeah, and also like you understand shots, and like all of a sudden you can turn disadvantages into advantages, right? Like sometimes if I'm playing in a strong wind and I hit a drive into the rough, I'm like, you know what, that's okay. My ball coming out of that rough isn't going to have much spin, and I'm going to be able to play it more like a normal shot. I have to deal less with the wind because I know the ball is going to knuckle out of this lie, and the wind's going to have less of an impact on it. And it's just this understanding, and like you said, and what Bob Jones said, the whole premise of that is playing out of those shots. Like those shots become way more comfortable when you're used to playing them,
Yeah.
right? So like divot lies, like the more you play it, the more you realize like this isn't that bad,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like something like I think it's crazy is like, and I've started to hear more people talk about it, but for years, like everybody's like, oh, 50-yard bunker shot. Those are awful. Those are awful. Well, it's like, if there's nothing in front of you, and this people think it's wild when they see me do this, I'll take like a 7 or a 6 iron and open it up, and the ball, just you let it run. Like it's an unconventional. People are trying to hit these like chip shot wedges out of there, like these different things. It's like just hit it like a normal sand shot and let the ball roll.
Yeah.
And it's like that sounds really weird. And people, the first instinct is like, I can't do that. But if you just hit a few of them, you're more likely. And I think like where people, I don't want to sound preachy, but like, every round should be treated as an experiment in a sense. When you've got the paper to pencil, the pencil to the scorecard in like a tournament setting, I get not experimenting. But if
Mm.
it's just a weekend game, try shots, Like everybody's in this fear of like, oh, I might shoot 84 when it doesn't really like what you're trying to do in every round you play is become a better golfer. And the best way to become a better golfer is to experiment and hit different shots, especially under the gun, right? Like
Mhm.
that's when if you've tried some shots in a casual 9-hole round at the end of the night, like it there's a level of getting over it and hitting it under the gun. And that's where like I think data has been incredible at teaching people some of the basics for how to play,
Yeah.
right? But there's also a whole philosophy of how to play under the gun. And,
And
if you want to do some things, sometimes it calls for playing outside of the book, right? I always think
amen. That's what the geniuses do.
that's what I always think about with major championships, right?
Hmm.
Like if as an observer, you're out there at most of the majors. I'm out there at some of the majors. I feel like there's always the major championships come down to a few moments and people that color a little bit outside the lines to get things done.
Yeah. Man, I love that. You've shared so much insight already. I've got I had this list of questions to ask, but you've been fantastic. All right, and now I got to let you go. You've been so great with me. You've shared so many great insights. Playing par four fives as par fours, right mentality of a whole, making golf fun, playing outside of the book. You've shared some incredible insight for people to go and try. But
And
now,
I want to be clear with outside the book. Like I think like the core fundamentals, like the best players in the world are the most conservative and they play away from targets for the in most cases, right? But there are times and rounds where you have to not play conservative if you want to do something special.
yeah, you know what? You're so right. I've said this time and time again. I call golf a game of risk, and great golfers are risk averse largely, but they know when they're going to roll the dice because it's basically a game of probability.
Yeah.
And I watched a movie last night. It was some army movie, right? And the army generals had their data guy there, and the data guy goes, "You cannot do this. There's a 14% chance of success." So basically, there's an 86% chance of failure. And so the army general talks over the radio to the one person left in the wherever they were, and he goes, "What do you think?" And the person's like, "I got this." And so he said, the president at the time goes, "Go ahead." And she pulled it off miraculously. But, at times you have the sense, and if you understand the probability, then you just make the most probable call at every time. Nick Faldo said to me one time, he said when he was playing all the time, he and Fanny would play a game of, okay, what do I want and what can I do? So he'd stand over a shot and he goes, I want to hit it at the flag. Can I do that right now? Wind, lie, how am I feeling? Whatever the cases might be, he goes, no. So they would move, what can I do? And they kept moving it to a place where what I want and what I can do intersected. Then he would hit that shot. And it worked pretty well. It worked out pretty well for him.
That's the thing. Like, I think like most golfers understand how their body's moving in a round, right? And I really believe like the way your body moves is going to dictate how you swing the
That's
club
what
on
I'm
a
saying.
day,
And the lie.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So like if your body's moving well in a round, if you're really swinging well, all this stuff about dispersion, it's all based off of averages, right?
Exactly. Mhm.
Some days you have it, some days you don't, and the averages come together. But if you're contending, especially if you're a PGA Tour player, right? If you're contending at the end of a tournament, your dispersions that week are going to be way tighter than your average,
Mhm.
which allows you to play slightly more aggressive. And if you want to win a golf tournament, we see it I mean, how many times do you think back about a tournament on Sunday night after you called it and be like, you know what? That guy got like a great bounce off a cart path and he won by one, right?
Yeah. Or he wasn't really in it, playing crappy on the first 6 holes, and all of a sudden, just because he hung around, then all of a sudden someone makes a bogey and all of a sudden you're back into it. Then just that jolt of adrenaline. Nick Price on the show shared when he won the Open at Troon, pardon me, Turnberry, his first one. He said to me, folks must go and listen to it. He goes, Mark, I had the worst warm up of the week. He goes, I couldn't hit the thing. My golf swing felt all funkier before the final round. And so he goes, as a result, the first 8, 9 holes, I played very defensively. He goes, and all of a sudden, Jesper, who was way out in front, Parnevik, made a mistake, and Nick got a sniff. And he goes, okay, I'm going to take a risk on one hole. And he hit driver way down there, something he wouldn't have done early in the round. And then he turned it into a birdie, then makes the improbable eagle on the par 5 down the back 9. And all of a sudden, he's won. He goes, but honestly, I was playing to avoid disaster for most of the way, then turned up the jets over the final few holes.
I mean, it's just that's the thing is like, and what your swing feels like at the start of the round could be completely different than how it feels on the 10th hole. Like, right? It's everybody's been there where just like one swing turns around your round. Like you've been slapping it all over the place,
Mhm.
and then you just you find a feel and it works. So I think like just understanding the pulse of the game, right? And pulse of you is so important to personal success. It is such like golf more so than any other sport in the world is such a like it's a 4-hour personal introspection, right? Like you are just dealing with yourself for 4 hours and trying to figure out how to get the most out of yourself, right? So
And
taking
your
a
par
big
number and your par number may change. Sometimes
yes.
it may be 70, sometimes it may be 79. That's where, like a Jordan Spieth, that guy, when he signs his scorecard at the end of the round, he has shot the best score he could possibly shoot on the day. Now, there's certain golfers I watch when they sign the card, it's the highest score they possibly could have shot, even though it's still good. It's uncanny, but that's for a different show.
I mean, that's the difference between the greats and the goods on the PGA Tour is the guys that just manage to get the most out of their rounds most often, right? It's
Yeah.
like there's so many guys and I think this is like so true. You hear this all the time. It's like you go to Monday qualifier, you go to Q school this week, you watch these guys and it's hard to discern the difference between them and a tour player, but it's all the little margins. They win on every little margin. The really great players. It's just they're just a fraction better here, a fraction better there, and that's where like you see it with like JT last year where he struggled mightily, And it's like you look at the stats, and it's just like these small dips, right?
Mhm.
Like a little bit dip off the tee, a little bit dip on approach, and it's like that's the difference between being a top 10 player and a top 80 player.
Yeah, that's true. I got so many questions still. Quickly, quick hit. Favorite architect?
Um, I think if I had to settle on one, it'd probably be Alistair McKenzie.
All right,
Um,
that's good enough. Okay. Uh, must play golf course on a budget off the top of your head.
all right, if you're in Wisconsin, Lawsonia links. If you're in Nebraska, make the trek to Wild Horse. It's worth it. And if you're in the East Lothian area, the one that gets in Scotland, the one that gets skipped often that shouldn't be skipped is Dunbar.
Awesome. Hey, I got to have you on again. There's a lot more stuff we got to talk about, but you were great, Andy. Thank you. Please direct the folks to where they can find you and where they can find all your stuff.
Yeah, in the podcast feeds, we have the Fried Egg Golf podcast and the Shotgun Start. And then if you're looking to if you're a big reader, sign up for our free newsletter. I think that's probably the best way to stay up to date with everything that we're doing. And you can sign up for free at thefriedegg.com. So thanks so much for having me on, Mark. Longtime fan, and appreciate it.
Listen, judging by some of the stuff you shared today, my list is long. You should get into sports or golf performance and psychology as well, bro.
I don't know.
Listen, thanks very much. Appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.